I suppose for me, you got to take the emotion out of it. At the end of the day, it's a business decision. You have no choice.
Well, after it's happened quite a few times too, you do gain experience and you pretty well know if it's going to come up or not.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can look at it and take an educated or as best educated guess as you can and say, no, I don't think I'm going to get it. Or, no, we've seen this before, and we got it last time. Or
For us, for our personal farm, we're at Friends Reach and the Cornwallis there. Since we've had those big, Cornwallis is probably an exception to that, but say Friends Reach farm, since we had the big floods, we have the last two that we've had this year, they didn't get onto the farm, so we haven't had to make that decision again. Yeah. Last year 2 years ago, whatever it was, with Cornwallis, we had a section there where we harvested half the paddock of this, like half of one section, and top made the other part. But now as we're harvesting it, we're finding, like I said before, you got rolls that are good, rolls that are weaker and whatnot. So it's we haven't had to, me personally, haven't had to make that call again, like the severity of what we first found in those,
Yeah, we just pretty much put a harvester in it, see what comes up, and then you just make the decision. Is it good, is it bad? Do you just fertilise it, wait a few months? A few months could turn into a year, and then you made the wrong decision. So sometimes going in early and fixing the problem before it's a disaster works better.
Totally agree, and don't make any rash decisions like we did that early on. Yeah. Like you just think, a good decision is any decision, which that's definitely not the case. Just stand back and have a bit of a good look at things, and then when conditions are right, obviously, just make sure it's safe to get out there in the first place. Yeah, give it a try. For starters, is a client going to be happy with this? So, if turf's 4 times heavier than it usually is it worth all that heartache to try to harvest a load and transport something 4 times, for the same amount of volume or meterage? That's what came into play for us, like all the truck movements to move the same amounts of turf. Because it's got such excessive weight, so a lot of the times the perfect decision would be to replant or cultivate or strip off the turf and just start again and just leave little sections, or get on the phone to someone who's not so flood affected and try to just band together and
If it happens, you get a flood, close to winter or in winter, realistically, by the time the ground dries up enough for you to be able to cultivate, turn paddocks over, and by the time you plant, you're talking September before you're putting plant in the ground. So, and that's if things dry up and it allows you to, because once you've got the silt in there, the silt just stays in there. You get this little bit of rain, you get a little bit of odd showers here and there. You can't even walk on the paddock, let alone put machines through it. So, and that's why, obviously the time of year and the weather does play a part in that decision making, because it just sits cold and dormant through the winter, and then it comes to September or before you can even realistically start planting again.
If it dries out fast enough. Problem is it stays wet.
It can work in your favour. Like you said, if you've got a fit paddock and it gets a lot of silt on it and it makes the grass really sick, it's not going to start growing realistically to the end of September, October. So if the ground dries up and you can get on it early in winter, re-prepare the ground, put fresh plant back in the ground, you're still going to have the crop ready by December or January, February, whatever variety it may be, but you're going to have a good product. You don't have to deal with waiting that 3, 4, 5 months and still knowing that you're not going to possibly get it off the ground.
I think it's the biggest thing, just the unknown. When you plough it in, you know what the results you're going to get. Probably you don't get another major flood the following year to destroy it, but when you plough it in, you almost know what you're going to get out of the product. When you try and salvage it, hit and miss, and you might get a good product and you might not. And you've waited 4 or 5 months for it to get there, and it might not harvest.
You also, you throw all sorts of money at it, spraying different chemicals and fertilisers, and so you're taking a hell of a lot of profit out of it anyway, just to try and salvage something that you don't even know if you're going to get it. That's what Jonathan was saying. Making rash decisions. It's all good and well to go and spray it with witch doctor powders and put all the expensive fertilisers on it. It can make it look great on top. It'll look beautiful, It still doesn't mean it's going to harvest.
100% right. I mean, if there's lots of work out there and you know, I've got the turf here, that can make you make the wrong decision to try and keep the turf and end up with a product like that when you really don't have any turf for the market. So sometimes if you just turned around and said, no, I'm gonna scrap this, I'm gonna start again, could be better off.
Pretty much a clean slate, and you know,
sometimes.
Yeah.
Look, for us around our instance, we had probably say two major paddocks of ours that we had to restart. We had to re-level. Was prior to the first floods, the levels weren't how we wanted them, and you know, we needed the opportunity to get rid of the 30-acre block and reshape and do what we wanted to do. So we used that opportunity to do that, to improve the paddock for future floods and, you know, future-proof the paddock and just make the paddock better. So we had empty ground, but on the areas that were, you know, half ready or got that bit of sand over the top, we persisted with it. We brushed out as much as we could. We mowed out, and you know, at the end of it, we were able to salvage part of the crop. But there were sections, you know, on the edge or then a paddock, those sections that you just have to start again. So we would harvest what we could, then we'd rip out and, you know, cultivate and do whatever you have to on the ends to match it up, and you know, hopefully years after that. So you know, it's not all just hold in, because you know you've got 12 months before. You know,
that's where your 2 or 3 years of inconsistent crops come.
You know, from the first flood, it had been 30 years or 20, you know, the best part of 30 years. No one had seen a flood on turf for a long, long, long time. And I think it goes back to rash decisions. You're best off staying off it. Don't rush into paddocks. You know, when the first ones come along, they were still half wet, and we're out there trying to rake stuff up, and you know, with like implements behind the tractor, and we did more damage than, you know, unlevel and, you know, putting ruts in paddocks, and it was just, because we're farmers, we're workers, and you feel like you need to be out in the paddock doing something, but sometimes you just need to stop and sit back and wait till it dries up.
That's what my brother's
and
like
then,
that.
you know, hey?
My brother's like that when it comes to fun. So don't even look at the paddock. So don't even look at it. Couple weeks
You're
later,
best off not going to work for 2 weeks. Stay away from it.
A couple of weeks later, you go walk in the paddock. You say, get out of it. Stop looking at it. Let it dry up, and then we'll make a decision.
Like what Jonathan said, don't make any rash decisions. That's the worst thing you can do. Absolute worst thing you can do.
with sand, I found on cooches, they can tolerate a lot really heavy brooming, cooch and zoysia, up to brooming some areas up to 12 times, down to almost nothing. Broom out the thatch, let it come back. It harvested reasonably well. You know, shortening the roll length also does help, like in terms of weight and strength, and definitely letting things dry. So the drier the better for turf strength, so to get the oxygen and sunlight onto the crop.
Our place, we only grow Kine cooch, so we can do that a lot more, and just taking a little bit off and getting it to a product where you might be able to harvest it later on, where you can build yourself some confidence with it. Also with the top maker, we've got a broom head for it, so where these guys spoke about brooming, you can broom with a top maker and actually pick that stuff up and take it off the paddock, so you're not actually getting into the layer completely like this. We've gave it a hard sweep and taken it straight off and away, and that's been pretty good for us. But in this instance here, that's been covered for a long time, and that's just too far gone, and that was just, you know, trying a few different things to, you know, get a bit of knowledge out there. But that's not, leaving silt on there for a long time and hoping for the best doesn't work. We ended up with that section of land there that was heavily top maked, and just start again.
Shorten the roll length was a good solution. Unfortunately, it puts a lot of cost into the product. Where you're getting 50 metres on a pallet, you're down to like 32 or something. And then you just got more weight on the trucks, loading more weight. Then the layers, you got to lay per roll, so you're getting charged more per metre to lay. So it all just got carried to the end user, unfortunately. Luckily, market conditions were good at the time, and we still were able to do it. In different times when market conditions weren't as good, there wasn't an option because they could find turf other places.
But for us, same thing. We use the combination of the brooms just to take down that. So what happens? You get the silt that goes in between the thatch. So then, before you can harvest it, the grass has obviously got to green up. So when that happens, the roots and the leaves and the runners are all running on top of the thatch that's in the top part of it, above your root base. So when you go and put a harvester through it, the harvester has the roller that runs on the top of the grass normally, and it's got an inch or a couple of inches of silt in there. The blade is sitting up naturally higher, so you're cutting above your buffalo sort of root base where it normally holds together. So you've got to get the blade to go deeper to allow to cut below that sort of base. So anything we found that we could reduce the silt level through the thatch of the grass, any of the turf that we salvaged, reduce that, pull that silt level out, whether it was the broom, the terra rake, mowing it out, different things, just to reduce the level of silt you had above your root base, made for a better product at the end, like a better harvest at a better turf, a lighter product, and was able to salvage it. Sections at the end there where just falls a bit too much silt, we use the top maker to top make it out, get rid of all that thatch and get back to your dirt again, and in some sections replanted the edges of our paddocks or lower edge of the paddocks to match up to the hard stuff that was harvested out.
Was that on buffalo?
That was on buffalo, yeah.
And when you top maked on buffalo, it came back through, it grew back? Or?
Grew back, but when we had harvested it, we weren't happy with it. So what we done last time, we top make the buffalo, and we actually strip sprayed it.
Right.
And because once it come back, because when you top make it, obviously it comes back really quick, but it had no tensile strength. So we actually put the strip spray through it to get some tensile strength back to it. Yeah. So what a strip sprayer is, it's made for, we normally use it in our couches and kais, but it pretty much sprays Roundup in rows and kills off part of the underground. Couches and kais have underground rhizomes and roots, and when they get too many, it weakens the strength of the tensile strength of the grass. So we go and kill part of it off to encourage the runners to run across more and make it tight and knit. Yeah, and that's what we found working in the buffalo.
It's like thinning out the crop pretty much to encourage horizontal.
Especially cooch, it gets root bound in the ground after a couple of harvests. After a couple of harvests, if you haven't strip sprayed it, you get more rhizomes in the ground. So when those plants, after you harvest and those plant regrows, it's too close, and you don't get those lateral long runners, that lock up. They just get individual plants everywhere with really short, stolons and runners, and the turf's half the strength. A quarter of the strength is what it would be as if it was strip sprayed.
Yeah, and on a buffalo, when you're top banking it, you can't go down to the dirt layer because you're taking away your material. You have to leave some of the buffalo in there because it doesn't have rhizomes. So you're leaving it, you're not going as deep, so you can't get back to your natural ground. So you're leaving that bit of turf there, so it comes back in 3 months, you've got green grass again, runs across, looks beautiful from the top, but same thing, because it's still got that silt in the root space of the grass, which just sort of rottens it out and just weakens the product. So you need that lateral growth to get some fibrous white roots back into the profile.
And the same thing with that. All right, you top make it, but then what are you going to do with all the material you top make it?
Absolutely.
So you're nearly better off plowing it in anyway. It's just...
Yeah, where do you take all that? Like, that's all
It's a
cost and
juggling act,
time.
yeah.
Where do you take all those hectares that
Like
you
you've
just
got
stripped
loads
off?
and loads of material you're taking off.
Just for me, the reason why I rathered the top maker was you could run over it, the bigger area, just push it up in the piles and get rid of it, and then your paddock was ready to go. It was hard.
Yeah.
If you ended up with another flood, the
Yeah.
risk of erosion was far less.
Yeah. You just got to weigh up your
and
options.
A lot of
Just
it.
I decided
Yeah.
to do it that way, and
Yeah.
and with Cooch and Kai, the issue of top making isn't as intricate as buffalo. Like if you go too deep with buffalo, you've done yourself a mischief.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't have much sand, more so silt. 3 paddocks down the bottom, we chopped them up, replanted, because they were just too heavy, and it was that heavy that it killed the cooch. And it's also low lying, so the water pretty well finished it off. But then, and the silt, and it just didn't grow back through the silt. So we just chopped 3 paddocks up. Some of the stuff up the top, closer to the road, we persisted. We heavily broomed it, and we were lucky, and we got away with it. Same thing, shortened rolls, heaps more transport costs and all that sort of thing. But we did end up getting a lot of it out, and some of it we just cut it and dumped it on the ground and pushed it up, and then started again and strip sprayed when it came back. But you got to. The problem is, even though the first initial flood, we had a paddock of cooch, we had that rake there, we let it dry up, but you still got to get rid of it. We tried vacuuming it, and the length of time and the work involved to get rid of it is quadruple just top making it.
When you're working with those kinds of machines there, it's going to be bone dry.
Yeah,
It's got to be bone dry.
It was dust storms, and we were raking, vacuuming, mowing, raking again, vacuuming. Extremely labour intensive, and you damage it when you're doing it multiple times, you do quite substantial damage to the grass anyway. So you're setting the grass right back anyhow. So it's a close call whether you just go from the start, just top make it, strip spray, and that's it.
We use it a bit in the buffalo just to get a bit of air in the bit you've swept that you've reduced as much as you're possibly going to reduce, just to get that little bit of air and aeration in the top part of it, just to break it up that little bit. And when it's dry, it sort of mows out a little bit. It's all just about taking that little bit more away, which becomes lighter at the end of it. That's what we found with it. But that's our only objective behind it, just to get it out of that last little bit of silt out of there without starting again, sort of thing.
If you get light, if you just get a bit of light silt, you can just lightly rake it, use a vacuum, mowing, vacuum it a few times. It does work, but it's not so much on the heavier parts where the silt drops.
And those machines aren't made for it too.
No.
So we're trying to incorporate
They're
those machines to do something that aren't.
Use something against its initial
not
purpose.
Built for, wears them out, and obviously, a lot of the machines in there, some of them are worth quite a bit of money, and you can go and do a lot of trial and error, and you might save some grass, but then you get a hefty repair bill later on.
Probably 15 mil, like Jonathan. I think Joey or Jonathan
like
said before.
15, 20
about
mil,
15 mil. Anything above that, you're going to struggle.
And that's provided it's silt, like it's muddy silt, so the composition of the soil can make a big difference. If it's like fluffy or powdery sand, just forget it, just start again.
Sand's very hard to pick up.
Very, very hard to mechanically move. And it moves where you don't want it, so when it's dry it's a nuisance as well, just blows around in the wind and poses other issues.
If you can walk on the paddock without it squelching under your feet or putting indents in the ground, if you can drive a tractor on the paddock without having wet wheels, you're probably half a chance. But don't even think about it before that.
Those hot days, real hot windy days, if you're getting in there and doing that kind of work there, raking and that, it sort of works with you a bit, I think.
Absolutely, that helps.
But you've got to worry about days right now. No hot windy days right now.
Time of year too, winter, autumn, if, as the days are short and everything's cold and wet, just say it's flooded last week, I wouldn't even bother trying for another 4 to 6 weeks after that, at least, yeah.
You got to remember you get heavy dew this time of year as well,
Yeah, this all has a part to play.
It just doesn't dry out.
Yeah.
But in saying that, I said hot windy weather and whatnot, you could go do a whole lot of raking, light top making and whatnot, and you could cause yourself problems with fungus, and that time of year brings its own issues. So
I think we're all familiar with even the finger test, if it goes down more than the depth of your fingernail, you shouldn't really be doing anything on paddock with any sort of equipment. as well.